Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. I want to let everybody know that the stream is getting ready to go on. What's going on, Entrepreneur King? I'm going to get ready to get started in a minute. Just have to go to Facebook and let everybody there know that the live stream is going on. Then I'm going to get started. Okay. Well, tonight's going to be a two-part topic. The first part of the show, I'm going to be talking about the legendary rapper DMX and his passing. And the second part of the show, I am going to be talking about the Man Crisis. So that's why the show is called DMX and the Man Crisis, because I believe that, sadly, DMX was another casualty in America's ongoing man crisis. Now, your DMX came about when I was in my 20s, and I came from the days of the old school of rap. I came from the days of the what people would call the golden age of hip hop with Big Daddy Kane, Rakim, Cool G Rap, Kid and Play. That was the era that I first discovered rap. And when I was a little boy, I listened to the Fat Boys and all of these super old school rappers. So DMX came from a different generation than mine, but I know a lot of my viewers, they came from the 90s and they remember your DMX, also known as Dark Man X. So a lot of brothers and sisters who came up in the 90s, DMX was an icon to that generation. And I'd have to say, being in my 20s, his sound was incredibly distinct. I mean, when you listen to DMX's music, it is practically just incredibly one of a kind. Nobody else had a sound like DMX. Nobody else had lyrics like DMX. And nobody had a style like DMX. So he practically was an icon when he came out in the late 90s, and he practically redefined hip hop as I see it. I mean, when I think about DMX, he practically made a powerful statement when he came into the rap game, and that statement was really making a statement about life in the streets and how hard things were. And Earl Simmons, when he was rhyming about life in the streets, he was coming straight from the heart. And that was one thing I could really respect about DMX, is that when you heard his lyrics, he was coming straight from the heart. He was coming straight from the heart about his life experiences and straight from the heart with every word that he was saying. Thank you, Kenneth, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your support. So I really do appreciate you giving me that super chat. And if you guys want to give me super chats or you want to donate to the Cash App, that would also be greatly appreciated as well. But that was what I experienced back in the 90s with DMX's music. And I remember when I was working at AmeriCorps Vista back in 2000, and that was the first time I ever heard the Rough Riders anthem. I mean, that was practically being bumped everywhere during the year 2000. I remember that was just everywhere in the summer and the fall of 2000. And I remember, that was practically the song of the millennium, at the start of the millennium. I mean, that Rough Riders anthem, that is one of, I say, DMX's definitive songs, but he had so many truly great songs. I mean, the song Up in Here, I remember that practically became a word out here back in the 90s. I mean, that song Up in Here, that was a song that everybody practically, it became a slang phrase that everybody was using back in the 90s. So I remember a lot of DMX's impact on Black culture. And I remember all of the things that he practically had an impact on. I mean, again, he had that slang phrase Up in Here from his song. He had the other song that I believe he did a couple of years later, the X Gonna Give It To You. So he had a lot of iconic songs. And when you look at that album cover, Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood, that is practically, as I consider it, the definitive image of DMX. I mean, when that image practically redefined, the 90s, late 90s in hip hop, when you look at that image, it's just a very, very powerful image. And it just, again, shows how much of an icon your Earl Simmons was. I mean, when you think about all of the things he had contributed to hip hop over the course of the late 90s, it was, again, these were defining moments in hip hop that people can really remember. I didn't really hear Slippin' T-Mac back in the 90s when I was in my mid 20s at the time. I was like 25, 26 years old when DMX was was just stepping into the game. I mean, I was, again, only 25, 26 years old, but I can really, a lot of his music really resonated with me. And I'm one of those guys who gets, stuck in time warps because I was like out of work at the time. And I didn't really get a chance to really pay attention to a lot of what was going on with the music and what was going on. But when I was working at AmeriCorps, that's when I really started to, get back into things as related to music and things going on in entertainment. Because most of the time I would be out here, I would be like looking for work and trying to find a way to get myself together. That was another thing I could really relate to as related to your DMX, is that he was a guy out here, he was just trying to get himself together. He was out here struggling because things were hard for him. And that was one of the things I could really relate to about your DMX, is that he was a guy out here, in spite of all of the obstacles put in front of him, he always persevered and he always tried to find a way to overcome in the face of adversity. And that was one of the things I could really respect about your DMX. This was a brother that, even though he came up in an abusive household and had dealt with a lot of abuse in his life, he always tried to push and tried to take himself to the next level. So I always respected that about your DMX, that he always was out here trying to do his very best, always trying to push. I mean, this brother had it hard ever since the day he was born. I mean, when I heard about his story, how he was born into to these teenage parents, and his father walked out on him, and he grew up in a single mother household with an extremely abusive mother, and that stuff was really just, it was sad to hear that this young man had to deal with all of this, hardship and all of this stuff going on. Had to deal with his mother having different boyfriends coming in and out of the house, and dealing with his own mother putting him out of the house. And that's why he was wandering the streets, and he had found connections with dogs, stray dogs in the streets, that he would go and stay with in the streets. And that was also part of what he put into his music, because he had a lot of relationships with dogs. He had a great bond with dogs, and that came part of his sound, and that was part of a lot of his music. So when I would listen to DMX's story, it just really resonated with me, because I grew up poor in the South Bronx, and I'm still struggling out here. So I understand where he was coming from, and it takes you to, again, a really dark place, and that's where he was coming from as part of the inspiration for his music, because he was dealing with a lot of stuff going on in his life. He was dealing with a lot of problems in his life, and music was the place that helped him really start to deal with a lot of his issues. And he was trying to, again, work on his career while he was working on his issues. And he was out here, again, pushing and persevering, and I could respect him for that, because he really wanted to go out here and do something with his life, instead of, falling through those cracks and winding up getting and messed up. So I understand what was happening to him, and I understood the things he was dealing with. So DMX was out here, and again, he was a man who, if he didn't have the help of people in hip hop, he could have easily fell through the cracks and wound up in the prison system for a long time. But he managed to, again, overcome those odds, and God was with him, and he managed to overcome all of those obstacles and really, build one of the most iconic careers in hip hop in the 90s. So that was something that I have great respect for DMX for going out here and, making what I consider to be the grandest lemonade out of lemons, and making dealing with that hard life and getting that success. That was something that I can respect him for, because it's something I'm doing right now, trying to do in my own life, and trying to deal with all these obstacles I ran into in my junior high school years and high school years, and even stuff I dealt with in my 20s and my 30s. So I know where this brother's struggles were coming from. I know what he was dealing with, because I've dealt with a lot of what he was dealing with before, and in my own life, with the exception of the drug addiction. This guy, he went, again, through a lot of hardships, and people don't understand how those hardships, they can really affect a man, and they can affect how he navigates the world. So when I look at DMX, I mean, he is going to be, as I see it, one of hip hop's true legends up there. He's up there with Biggie. He's up there with Tupac. He's up there with Rakim and Kane and Kool G Rap. And he's up there because he came to the rap game. He brought his own sound. He brought his own style, and he had his own voice. So that's what makes him a legend. And he's not only a legend as related to the music, he was also a legend as related to his transition into acting. Now, I really haven't seen a lot of DMX movies. I've heard of many of his movies, like Your Never Die Alone, Your Exit Wounds, and a couple of other movies that he's done, like Romeo Must Die. But these were movies that, as I see it, practically showed how versatile an actor he was, and how he had all these amazing skills. And he probably could have gone on to even further greatness outside of the rap game, where he already was an icon. And he probably could have done that if he was in a supportive environment in his early age. Far Side, you never saw a DMX movie. You don't know what you're missing. I mean, he's done some really good movies. Um, as far as I've heard, I mean, heard Exit Wounds was good. I heard Romeo Almost Die is practically a classic for many people, and I've heard a lot of good things about, Romeo Must Die, but and Never Die Alone. But he was, again, he had amazing acting skills, amazing acting range. And again, like the late Aaliyah, his contemporary, he was a man who was, I say, taken too soon. And he was somebody that, again, will be greatly missed as related to hip hop, because he practically redefined hip hop in the late 90s with his own distinct style. So when I think again about DMX, he's just, again, an icon of hip hop, and we really lost a great one. And we lost a great one because of the of his because of what happened to him. And what happened to him was something that I believe was, again, connected to America's ongoing man crisis. So your DMX, he really was while he was a legend and an icon, he was a man in crisis. And he was a man in crisis because he was still dealing with a lot of demons he was dealing with and struggling with due to the way he was raised in that house, that toxic household he was in. So your DMX, he was a man in crisis because due to that upbringing he had a lot of trauma, and he had a lot of pain. And in order to go out here and deal with a lot of that pain, he was out here and he was on drugs, and he was dealing with drug addiction, and he was also dealing with some mental health issues. And these issues continued to plague him for years, and it led to him having some issues over the course of his life. So your DMX, even though he had great success in the world of hip hop, he was a man in crisis. He was a man struggling with a lot of different things. And he was out here trying to do the very best he had with what he had, because when you don't have much, you just try to work with what you've got. And he was trying to do that out here in these streets. And he was just, the whole thing was those demons, just, he never really got off his back. And that was one of the big problems he was dealing with over the years. I mean, he was dealing with drug addiction for years. He was like, because when you're an addict, you're once you go into recovery, it's not like you just, oh, it's over, I'm not taking drugs anymore. No, it's an ongoing thing, and there's chances that you may slip. There's chances that you may wind up not going because of stresses. And when the stresses he was dealing with were things like baby mamas, things like the IRS, things like the police constantly being after him. I mean, he was dealing with a lot. And thank you very much for Wrestling Superstar for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Yeah, DMX was an excellent lyricist and actor. And yeah, he was a man in crisis due to his upbringing. Thank you. I really wanted to thank you for the support for the live stream, but I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a good night too. So yeah, I mean, DMX was, again, he was a man in crisis. He was a man dealing with a lot of different stuff. And these people, again, people have been after him for a good long time. I mean, the police have been after him. The IRS was after him. And he was dealing with a lot of different charges for different things. And that really takes a lot out of a guy. And it takes a lot of stress on a guy who's already being stressed by the childhood that he was dealing with, because when you have a lot of childhood trauma that you're dealing with, you deal with different things, not only as related to the external, you also deal with internals like flashbacks and memories that you're dealing with, and that stuff can just it can tear at you. And I know that from experience, from having to deal with what I dealt with in high school and junior high school. I'm still dealing with, again, things as related to flashbacks and memories and stuff like that. So I know that he was going through, a lot of stuff, and then you have, he was trying to make a living in this business, and the music business is a rough business out here. Music business, it's one of those businesses that there's a lot of shady people. A lot of people will mess you up, and they will put stress on you. And this guy was going through a lot of stress going on out here, and people don't understand what this guy was dealing with, and how it can just really wear a guy down over the course of his life. So it might look like 50 years to everybody out here, but it was a rough 50 years for brother DMX, and he was, again, dealing with a lot of stuff out here, and just trying to get through day by day. Now it was looking up for him, because he was about to, again, start another. He had signed a deal, I had read, with, I think it was one of these record companies. He was getting ready to do another album, but that's a lot of stress too. And he was, again, dealing with a lot, and that's probably why he relapsed in as related to addiction. And this is what led to him having this overdose that led to his passing. Because, again, when you're out here and you're working on different projects and you're already an icon, it's a lot of pressure on a guy to go out here and make something better than what you did before. And got us a troll, so I'm gonna have to block this guy, because I'm not gonna have anybody disrespecting the memory of this brother, because this brother's memory, this brother's legacy is something that needs to be honored. DMX meant a lot to a lot of people, and I'm not going to have him disrespected during this stream. This brother, again, he had a major impact on a generation of people. Everybody practically remembers a DMX song. Everybody practically remembers a movie role that he has played, and some people remember how he made that appearance on Mad TV, and in that joke he was doing about on Mad TV, what's going on, Fox Strikes, he was actually, I believe he was coming from his heart, that he wanted people to see Earl the man, and not just DMX the character that he had created. He was more than Dark Man X. He was a husband. He was a father. He was a lot more than what people want to present as related to in the media. And I'm not really appreciating the way some in the mainstream media have tried to minimize, DMX's memory, as I've seen. I remember I was watching ABC News this afternoon, and they had the whole big 10 minutes on Prince Philip, but they only gave DMX 1 minute. And I was really insulted by that, because you're going to give a icon to this generation that came after mine, Gen Y and Gen Z. These kids who grew up in the 90s, DMX was an icon, and you give him 1 minute. And then you have the New York Post, which also disrespected the memory of DMX. As this man was in the hospital, they're sitting there talking about all the bad stuff that was going on in this man's life, taking a swipe at DMX. And I thought that was really low, to go out here and disrespect this man, and as he's just out here in the hospital fighting for his life. I thought that was a real insult. to disrespect this man's memory and disrespect this man as he was struggling in the last moments of his life by going out here and talking about how bad things were in his life, but never really putting any sort of perspective on things to understand that your DMX was a man who was in crisis, and he was a man who was dealing with a lot of different things. And the reason why he was dealing with all of this stuff was because his family didn't support him, and he didn't really get much support from your mainstream media. I mean, this is a brother who got a lot of what he got from the streets. He was out here scratching to survive in these streets, and he had to scratch and claw his way to get where he was. And as he was trying to scratch and claw his way to get where he was dealing with all of this trauma he dealt with growing up. So he was dealing with a lot. And I really was, again, sad to hear about his passing, because this was a man who you can, again, respect the work he put in as a musician. You can respect the work he put in as an entertainer, but you can also respect the man that he was, because he went out here, even though he was facing all of this hardship and adversity and all of these struggles, he still managed to make himself a success. And even as he had this success, he was still fighting and clawing. And even though he had his setbacks and his struggles, you could respect this man because he was out here, and he had great discipline and resolve to, again, keep pushing. And even in his last days, he was still pushing out here. And I can again respect all of this stuff he was doing out here. Yeah, I know about that, T-Mac, but that's par for the course with these white feminists out here. Yeah, they always want to come out here taking swipes and digs and disrespecting black men like him and Kobe Bryant. You always get, a feminist out here always looking to go do some ratchet stuff. And this is the stuff that they try to do. They try to take swipes at our iconic brothers out here, because they don't want those black men to be out here having a legacy. And you can't really, like Kobe, you can't really destroy the legacy of DMX, because he's an icon. I mean, he was an icon for an entire generation. So there's no way you can destroy anything that he built, because everybody knew of DMX's music. Everybody knows of that album cover, Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood. Everybody knows of that. Then that's an iconic image of DMX. I mean, I say that is the definitive image of DMX. When I think of DMX, that is the image, because I remember in '98, I think when that cover came out, that was a masterpiece image that practically, as I see it, is one of the ones that practically defines his music. And then you have other songs he has done, like the Rough Riders anthem in 98, 99. I mean, people were still bumping that as far as 2000. I mean, that just shows how his music was a classic. I mean, this song came out in 98, and 2 years later, they were still playing that song. And the Rough Riders anthem, I mean, that just shows you how powerful his music is. And then about a couple of years later, he had the X Gonna Give It To You. So he had so many great songs in his catalog. And this guy, you can't, like Joy was saying, you can't think anything bad about the man, because the man, he just went out here and he lived the dream. I mean, how many rappers out here I can say that people still play his music and still are, that music still resonates with them? And how many people can say, that their music is still going on practically 20 to 25 years later. I mean, there are all kind of rappers out there who came up and came along in the 80s. I remember Special Ed coming up with I Got It Made. I mean, they don't really play that song anymore, but they still play a lot of DMX music today. And again, it's a part of the culture. I mean, the music is iconic, and it's and and the images that they present of him is iconic. So I can't really disrespect anything that he did that's related to music wise. And he had again a lot of personal issues that he was dealing with, and he was dealing with a lot of different stuff. I mean, he was just dealing with things and a lot of stuff he learned. Like a lot of people would say things about, oh, he had 15 children or 13 children. But look at the household that he came from. I mean, probably would not be this man who had 13 children if there was somebody there to give him guidance. So he didn't have a mother or a father to give him that guidance. He didn't have a mother or a father there to give him that support. And he didn't have anybody, really there to give him any sort of help. So he had to go and figure out stuff on his own. So I'm not going to fault him for all the kids that he had or the way things went, because he was just picking up what he learned. And that's what a lot of men in crisis do. They pick up what they learn because there's nobody there to really teach them and matriculate them into manhood. And I remember looking at Dondra T. Whitfield's Instagram, and he was talking about DMX, and he came to the same similar point, talking about, how he never really got to be the man that he wanted to be because he was still out here struggling with what he was dealing with, and he was working with what he had learned. And that happens to a lot of guys out here. You're working with what you got. There's nobody there to really, teach you what you need to know. Nobody really there to teach you the male life skills that you need or the male survival skills that you need. So you just learn what you can in the streets, and you learn what you can, and you learn what works out here without anybody that supports you. So I know where he was coming from because I myself, again, I didn't really learn a lot of stuff until later on. And that was even with having my father in my life. I mean, some things, some guys, they don't know, and they don't know, they can't teach you. And DMX was really, he didn't have anybody to teach him. So I can't get mad at him about, the life that he lived. I mean, he was trying to live a life in the Most High as best as he could, but he couldn't really do like he wanted to do because he had no support systems. And because he was out here, again, trying to do his best, God has blessed him with success, and God had blessed him to do the very best that he could with what he had. And again, he had an abundant life as I see it because, he had a large family. He had a lot of success. I mean, he practically was an icon in the 90s and the early 2000s. And I could, again, see that how God had blessed your DMX and made him a great success, even in the face of adversity and even in the face of all of his struggles. I mean, the Lord truly blessed this man to have, amazing and tremendous success. I mean, again, he was the voice of an entire generation, and that's a major blessing when you think about where this brother was coming from, that he had all of this great success, and he had, again, he had traveled the world. I mean, been in movies. I mean, most guys who come from the streets, they could never even think about having the life that DMX had in 50 years. I mean, most guys who come from the streets, like the South Bronx here, they barely make it to their 20th or 21st birthday. And if they make it to 22, they consider that to be a blessing in and of himself. But he had, again, as I see it, a great and prosperous life here. but he never really got to the fully abundant life he could have had as related to his spiritual life, because he was still struggling with a lot of demons he was dealing with, and those demons were part of that man crisis that is a part of this country. Like I talk about in the man crisis, addiction is something a lot of men have to deal with, and the reason why a lot of men become addicted to drugs and things is because they have to deal with so much pain in their life, and they're looking for a way to try to escape that pain for just a moment. So a lot of people, they don't understand why a guy would become addicted to drugs. And again, when you have a hard life and you're just looking for any sort of break, this is what people go out here and do. And now I don't condone drug use, but I understand why people go out here and get on this stuff, because they just wind up having to deal with so much, and it overtakes them, and eventually their attempt to get away from their problems becomes yet another problem. And that's what happened to DMX, but he didn't really know about that. I mean, he was just a kid, and when you're a kid, you don't really know what you're doing, and when you don't have anybody there to give you the guidance that you need, you wind up going out here to do things that you didn't think that probably aren't right, but you wind up going out here and doing things you really should not really be doing. So I understand where DMX was coming from, as related to his struggles, and I understood, all the things he was dealing with, in this life, and I understood, the things that were tormenting him and really preventing him from living that truly abundant life as God wants to give us, and the Most High wants to give us. So, I understood what was really preventing him from having that abundant life, because even in the face of his blessings, he was still dealing with all of these demons out here, and he was still trying to fight those demons. And that's all part of having a relationship with God, is that you're in the middle of spiritual warfare, and that warfare goes on, and it just does not stop, because you're not just fighting men, you're fighting these spirits and principalities of darkness. And one of the most dangerous principalities of darkness is yourself. So this is what happens. I mean, you don't really think about it, but you become your own worst enemy sometimes. And this is part of what happens to a lot of men in crisis, is they become their own worst enemy, and they wind up not only fighting the demons, but they also wind up fighting themselves. So Joy asked, and you wonder if somebody gave him some bad stuff. That could have been, he could have got some bad stuff, and that happens when you go out here and you get addicted to drugs. You might possibly get some bad stuff, but we will never know. I mean, this is what the reports are saying. There are rumors saying that he went out here, and I'm not going to get into it, but that he took the medication for the pandemic, because YouTube will flag you if you talk about that whole thing. So I'm not going to say anything about that, but that's a speculation people have. But they're saying that he took some drugs, he OD'd on drugs. And when you're 50 years old and you take some stuff, your body's not as strong as it used to be. And when you've been taking this stuff for years, it can hit you hard. And that's probably, sadly, what happened in the case of DMX, is that he wasn't like he was when he was younger. And as he got older, what happened was eventually this stuff that he took, it went bad, and it just led to him ODing last week. And in spite of every effort to try to save his life, what happened was he wound up finally losing his life today. And it was really sad to see this man lose his life, because You know, he was again an icon, but he was a guy. He was struggling with a lot of demons in his life, and he was struggling with a lot of pressures in his life, and nobody really knows what those struggles are like until they wind up in a situation like he wound up in, because it's a lot of, again, a lot of, when you once you get success, it's a lot of pressure to try to stay on top. It's a lot of pressure to come out here and try to, top yourself and do another project that is better than your last project. I mean, it's a lot of pressures, and I know about those pressures because when I'm writing books, I'm always trying to write a better story or a story on the same level as the ones I wrote before. I'm always trying to make sure that the quality level still remains high. And I don't want to go out here and and produce a bad book that turns people off. So I know what those type of pressures are, in the entertainment business and the music business, because you could come out here and put your heart into an album, or you could put your heart into a book, and the audience may not like that book or like that music, and then they start talking bad about you, even though you were trying to, tell a story or present a message in the story, and the audience does not get that, and it can just practically crush you to get that type of feedback from the audience, because you really thought, oh, this is what I really want to make, and this is what I want to convey. This is the message I want to present in this work, and people may not really resonate with them. I mean, for example, I remember, when I was out here, I think it's over here, open, oh, here it is. I mean, when I first hired Bill Walker to do ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, this is Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, and when I was doing the ISIS series books, I was getting a lot of, people telling me, oh, this character is white, or this character is too light-skinned, and it would get to me when people would say things, oh, it's not black enough. I mean, I understand those type of pressures people have when you go out here and, put some work together, and then you get all this negative feedback. Now, you know what you're trying to do with a character like with ISIS, and this is Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. It's going to be available on April 20th. I was trying to say that the character had golden skin because in ancient Egypt, they said that the gods had gold skin. But a lot of people took it as, oh, you're trying to make this white character, or this character is too light skinned. And I was just out here again trying to make an artistic statement on what I researched about the Egyptian gods. And I was trying to talk about the character having golden skin because they said Egyptian gods had gold skin. And they also talked about how Seth had red hair. And that's why Isis has the auburn hair, because Seth was talked about as having red hair. But people took it another way, and they gave me a hard time when I did the original Wrath of the Cyber Goddess cover. But I still had to persevere in the face of all those pressures, because, people are going to say things and do things, and they're going to say, oh, you're a sellout and things like that. And the same thing probably was happening with DMX. All these pressures were coming out here, people coming after him. Oh, you're going Hollywood, you're selling out. And it's like, no, the brother was talking about his experiences, talking about his life experiences, talking about, things relating to him and his struggles in his music, making his message in his music. I mean, he was out here putting together his music based on his experiences, like I do with many of my John Haynes books. A lot of those books are drawing from my life experiences and my personal experiences. I mean, I'm coming from the heart when I write a lot of books like Temptation, John Haynes, and books like Man Who Rules the World and Man with Nothing to Lose. That was coming, straight from me, straight from my life and my life experiences. So people would be like, oh, he's making something up that's trying to say that he's crossing over. It's like, no, the guy wasn't crossing over. He was out here presenting his experience. And he was out here, dealing with all these pressures because you want to go out here and continue making consistent quality music and continue to make quality material. So a lot of people want to say, "Oh, you're doing things." It's like, no, you're trying to continue making your message and making your music and making it the best it can be. Thank you, Mobar7170, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Yeah, X was a real brother, and thank you for saying it's just like me. And yeah, we both come from the same kind of situation, so I know where he was coming from. I mean, yeah, Jeffrey, I would talk about that, but I can't talk about that because, YouTube, the way that they are, I mean, that's what's speculated. So I have to go with the official reports. I mean, I would talk about that if YouTube would change its policy, but they're not going to change their policy, as related to that speculated rumor, as related to the pandemic. So that's something that people have speculated, but I can't really get into because they'll flag you and take your channel down if you talk about those type of things. But that is a speculated rumor because, yeah, DMX really, again, he wanted to get back out here. He really wanted to get his life together, get things in order. And he wanted to get things right. I mean, this is a man who wanted to do right in spite of all the wrong that was done to him. And he was out here, he wanted to set that example. He wanted to set that example and be, a man and out here. And I could just, again, see his character as a man. And that's, again, something I really respect about him, is that he had this great character. Even in all of that darkness, he still was out here trying to go out here and do something. So when I look at him, I see a lot of myself in my experiences, coming from the South Bronx and coming from poverty and still struggling and still trying to get to that next level and still trying to stay on that level. These are things that a lot of black men are trying to do. And even though we're men who are out here who have this man crisis going on, they're still trying to go out here and do and work and continue to push. They're still out here trying to go out here and do what needs to be done. And that's something that, again, you look at it and it's like, you can see all the positives of DMX's life. I mean, he came from the worst, but still God blessed him to be the very best. And he blessed him with great success. Now, there's another rumor talking about how people, I think Jay-Z and Beyonce bought his masters so his family could have those masters to continue to generate wealth from. I don't know if that's been confirmed out here. And that is something that if it was done, it was commendable to do that so that he has those masters and he can continue to make, his family can continue to make money off of his masters. But maybe that should have been done before so that this man could still continue to have wealth. I mean, and that's something that's very important, is passing wealth from one generation to the next. And yeah, they did try to hinder DMX's progress. I mean, I heard about how the IRS tuned him up. I heard about how the court system tuned him up. And I heard how they actually mocked him in court one time. They played his song Slippin' as he was coming to court. And again, that's passive aggressive stuff that racists do when they see a successful black man. They always want to bring a black man down. They always want to try to tear a black man down. And they always want to try to destroy a black man because they are jealous of that black man's success. And that's really, I believe they was trying to do with him, is that they saw him with that success and they just kept trying to tear him down. But he just kept, because he had that great resolve, he was just continuing to fight and claw and push. And even in the face of adversity, I mean, that's something that he was out here trying to do, was like, yeah, I'm down, but I'm never out. And that was one of the other things I liked about DMX, is that even though people would knock him down, he would get back up and he would always keep fighting. And I guess he learned that when you're in the streets, you have to learn that, because if you don't keep fighting, you're going to be dead. So there's no choice but to keep fighting until the end. So that's one of the things he was doing out here. He was out here fighting every day, you know, we're trying to make the best of every day out here. And that was something he was trying to do out here, and something he was trying to do even into the last days of his life. So he was out here again, pushing, persevering. I mean, even into the last days of his life, because he was trying to rebuild himself to continue making records, continue going on with his career. And he was, again, still fighting to go out here. And you could respect that, because that's what a man is supposed to do. That's what a man has to do out here, because the only person who can take care of you is yourself. And that was something that DMX was doing. He was out here. He knew he was the only person who could take care of himself. So he had to go out here and continue to push. And I just, again, he's going to be greatly missed as I see it, because we, again, lost an icon today. We lost a legend today. I mean, when you think of guys who were cornerstones of hip hop, and you think about guys who practically defined the music of hip hop, you think of, in the beginning, you think about Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, who practically defined hip hop with the message. Then we move on to other groups like Modi and LL Cool J and the Fat Boys in the mid 80s, in what I consider to be the golden age of rap, which is the stage where we started to see rap starting to come into its own. Then we get to the age of the lyricists, which was really the most diverse period of rap, where we saw different rappers with different styles and a lot more wordplay coming in. And the guys in that cornerstone of that era were Heavy D's, your Cool G Raps, your Big Daddy Kanes, your Rakims, your Kid and Plays. They set a cornerstone. Then you had the lady rappers like Queen Latifah, Cookie Crew. Let me see, there was Moni Love. I mean, that period of the late 80s, early 90s. And then you had guys like X-Clan and Public Enemy. I mean, that was a period. And then you had the 90s with Tupac and the gangster rap period. But then became your DMX, who practically turned the whole gangster rap genre on its ear and turned the whole rap game on its ear with his own distinct voice, his own distinct style, and his own distinct tone that he drew from his own life experience. I mean, he practically is a cornerstone rapper when you really look at it, and he practically redefined late 90s rap music and early 2000s rap music, and practically changed the sound of rap music. So that's something that, when you look at it, it has to be, it's like something that, you know, is, if you put it in a museum for rap history, it would be one of the cornerstone periods of rap history. So when seeing DMX pass, again, this is a moment in history as I see it, because it's just like the loss of Tupac and Notorious B.I.G. back in the mid 90s. I mean, we lost icons there. I mean, Tupac was an icon, Biggie was an icon. I didn't mention them earlier, but when you think about, again, mid 90s rap music, and early to mid 90s music is Tupac and Biggie, but DMX is late 90s and practically redefined the sound of rap music, redefined the style of rap music, redefined the way people presented themselves. That there's a lot there, and I can understand why so many people were mourning DMX, because people grew up with this music. I mean, a lot of kids who grew up in the 90s, especially the late 90s, when they were going to high school or junior high school, in 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. This DMX was a part of the kids growing up. I mean, he was a part of their lives. I mean, it's just like when my generation, House Party was my movie as related to rap movies, and that was the one that practically defined my generation. And when you think about DMX and the movies he was in, like Exit Wounds, Belly, Never Die Alone, Romeo Must Die, that was a lot of kids who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. That was their music. Those were their movies. He was their icon, and he was a part of people growing up. He was a part of their generation. He was a part of their time in life. I mean, his music, his sound, again, was a part of them growing up. And again, I remember summer of 2000, Rough Riders Anthem was the anthem of the summer of 2000. I remember hearing people bump that. I mean, I had a coworker who wanted to get the Rough Riders pictures on her screen. I mean, this was, again, a major moment in people's lives. And it was something that, again, people grew up with DMX and they grew up with his music. So Mobar7170 says, yeah, DMX was 7 months older than me. I didn't live the life that he did, but the way he expressed himself through his music allowed us to empathize and understand the life he lived realistically. Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, when he would put this music on, it allowed us to see into his world, and it allowed us to see, and relate to him. And that's something that really good music does, is that it allows you to connect with the person. It allows you to connect with their experiences. I mean, when somebody has a really good sound, it really, the music's gonna stay with you. The lyrics are gonna stay with you because the guy is coming from his heart, and DMX came from his heart in a lot of his music, and that's something that a lot of guys today, they just don't know how to do. A lot of these lames that are out here, they don't know how to come from the heart with their music. A lot of these guys don't know how to come from the inside of themselves and let themselves speak to the audience. I mean, truly great musicians can go out here and speak to you with their music. And DMX was a truly great musician because he could speak to you with his music. I mean, he could speak to you in his songs. He could speak to you in his lyrics. And that's something that people, they don't know how to do anymore. They want to try to commercialize the music, because a lot of these people out here, they would go out here and they make their music just try to pander to people and try to sell people, but they don't really speak to you. And a true artist, he's going to speak to you in his music. He's going to speak to you in his writing. Like when I go out here and I write books like Temptation of John Haynes or Spinsterella, I come from the heart when I'm writing those books. I don't try to speak to people. I do speak to people when I'm doing a story, because I'm drawing from my life and my experiences. And I can make you really feel, just like DMX makes you feel what he's saying. And it's just speaking to you. And that's something, again, that is very, when people do that, it's powerful, because, again, that's coming from the heart. I mean, that's not no flashy gimmicks. This is who he was. This is how he lived. This is where he's coming from as a man. And this is him, coming out of everything that he is, pouring his soul into that kind of music. And again, that's what led to him having, again, all of these pressures and struggles, because he was dealing with stuff from his childhood. He was dealing with stuff that's related to trying to navigate life as an adult. He was dealing with a lot of different things, and again, a lot of pressures he was dealing with as related to trying to build and maintain a career, trying to deal with different baby mamas coming at you, different people coming at you. I mean, a lot he was dealing with, and a lot he was struggling with. And he was, again, he had dealt with so much in his life, and people don't, again, know how many struggles a man has out here. They don't understand, how many pressures a man is dealing with. I mean, yeah, Anthony, I know his song came out in '98, but people were still playing it in 2000. I mean, I remember I was working at America where they were still playing, DMX music in 2000. That's how powerful his music was. It went on for, again, 2-3 years. I mean, it was still being played. They were still playing his music, and that, again, that's a sign of a true master, is when they still play your music 2-3 years later, and even 20-25 years later, people are still playing your tracks. I mean, that is a sign that you are a master craftsman. I mean, when you go out here and people are still reading your stuff or listening to your stuff 10, 15, 20, 25 years later, like they're doing with DMX right now, that is a sign of, a being a legend, is still people listening to your stuff, because that means it's classic. And when your stuff is classic, it's just going to go on for years and years. I mean, that's, again, a sign of a true master and a true craftsman. I mean, that means your stuff is really solid. So, yep, Zeke, and most people, yeah, they'll hear a song today and forget about it, but not with DMX. They just don't. You can't forget his songs because the sound is so distinct. I mean, the lyrics are so distinct. The style is so distinct. It is just one of a kind. I mean, when you go over to a DMX song, it is absolutely one of a kind. There is no nobody can compare it to him. I mean, when you listen to his music, it is his music, and when you hear those beats coming on, you know that it's his song. So he was, again, that's what makes him an icon in the late '90s rap game, that still had so many years, on it. And I believe he would have still been with us had he been able to really be able to get help, because he was a man in crisis. And if people went out here and, again, knew how to help DMX and help him, deal with a lot of the demons he was dealing with, I believe that the brother would still be with us today. But the Most High knows better than we do. And he knew that his time was up as he saw it. So he decided to bring DMX home. And I'm hoping that he's finally at peace, because, he struggled so much in this life. I'm hoping that God will give him some peace in the next life. And I'm hoping that God will have some mercy on your DMX, because, again, the brother suffered so much here on earth. The brother suffered so many hardships. He suffered so much pain in this life. So I'm hoping that God would have some mercy on DMX, the brother DMX, and hopefully maybe in the next life it will be able to have the peace he was never really allowed to have, with the struggles he had to deal with his mother, abusing him, his mother abandoning him, and then having to deal with all of the other issues in his life. These are things I'm hoping that he gets some peace from, because he was dealing with so much in his life. I mean, he was, again, a man who was dealing with a lot of issues, and he was dealing with so much, and he was struggling with so much. And, to see him, again, still be blessed even in the face of his struggles reminds me of the Bible, where it talks about, God preparing a table for you in the presence of your enemies. And God did prepare a table in the presence of DMX and many of the enemies he had. And that was one of the things I saw, with his life, how he was blessed like that, to have God prepare that table for him and be able to live well and be able to, and have that great life. And I believe he could have had, again, a more abundant life, but he was still dealing with so much. But I really see how God has blessed DMX. And I'm hoping, again, that God continues to have, that mercy on your DMX even after he has passed. And I'm hoping that he and his family, have have some peace and closure as related to these times. And I'm hoping that, they are able to get through these struggles, because Earl Simmons, he, even in his passing, again, he had a great impact on so many lives. And even when he was on this earth, he had an impact on so many lives, like Anthony's. I mean, he was a part of his childhood, part of Mobar's childhood, not childhood, but his adult life. But he was somebody who he had an impact on so many people's lives. And that's something that I can really, I think about it, and it's just, again, shows me the power of the Most High and how he can bless someone even if they have nothing. He can help them become someone who can practically define an entire generation. So I'm going to wrap up tonight's stream, but before I do wrap up tonight's stream, I want everybody, to go out here and put in some orders for the upcoming ISIS Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. This is a book that's coming out on April 20th, and I want to try to get this book to the same double-digit sales that everybody got John Haynes taking care of business to. And I really want to get the sales numbers up on this book. This is the third part of the Cyber Goddess saga, which everybody loves. And I really want to try to get the readership up on this ISIS series book. This is a major story in the ISIS series, and it also features John Haynes. He has a major part in this story. So I'm asking everybody to head over to Amazon.com to pick up a copy of ISIS Revenge of the Cyber Goddess and pick up that book on Amazon. That really helps things out. And I also want to let you guys know a little bit about the upcoming John Haynes comic book. So on the John Haynes comic book, I have finished most of the model sheets of the characters, and I'm getting ready, and I've also done some cover concepts. And if you want to take a look at those cover concepts that I'm planning for the John Haynes at Death's Door comic, you can head over to the Patreon and check out those covers. So I have already done the concepts for both the regular and the variant cover. And I've talked to Mike Williams, the artist who does most of the John Haynes covers, and he's going to be doing one of the covers for the John Haynes at Death's Door comic. So Mike will be doing one of the covers, and I'm just waiting to hear from the other artist on the project. But Mike is on for that cover, and that cover will be one of the ones featured on the John Haynes at Death's Door comic. I still have to do some more designs for this John Haynes at Death's Door comic, but it's getting closer and closer to the point where I'm ready to, send the package. Just waiting for the artist to get back to me and let me know when they're ready to go out here and do this project. So I have to do some set pieces, model sheets of set pieces of the Morris Phillips penthouse, and I have to probably do another John Haynes model sheet, because the one I have is extremely old. It's about 4 or 5 years old. It was from Bride of Dracula and Escape from Transylvania. I mean, John's outfit hasn't changed, but I want to do a little bit more clearer picture of it. And the John Haynes comic it's coming along. I'm just here waiting for the artist to get back to me, because he was doing another project, and I'm just waiting for them to come available. And then we'll be on our way to doing work on the project. Everything is practically set up and ready to go whenever they're ready. So this one is coming together, and I'm still again working on it. Just as I'm getting ready to work out a rough cover for the 2022 ISIS book, ISIS Legacy, and I'm also practically working on another nonfiction book, which I'm about to get back to, which is Stop Simping in Cyberspace. And that's a nonfiction book I'm hoping to have out later this year. So a lot of different projects going on. I still have to do another E-Steam book. So I have a lot of projects I'm trying to get together, and I'm hoping you guys will come back for next week's stream, where I'm hoping to talk about something else. But when I think of, again, DMX, he was, again, a brother who had an impact on a lot of people, a lot of lives. And I look at him and I see how God has blessed him. And I'm hoping that the brother rests in power, because he did a great work in this life and God has blessed him abundantly in this life. I hope to see you guys on next week's stream. And I thank you for coming to this week's stream.